So again, when you run into these problems, we do provide the table for you, and it's only there to help you organize all the information, I guess. So what I want you to do is you're gonna look at this as a cubic. Right now, the only way you guys know how to solve cubics is to do a factor by grouping. Okay, so I'm gonna pause for a second. I'm gonna give you a chance to do the factor by grouping on your own, and then we'll write it. And I just want you to come up with the critical values. So when you get done doing the factoring, set them equal to 0, and tell me what numbers are the critical values. So do that now.
It doesn't, you can't wrap it.
So when you look at the first set of parentheses, there's a 2 in front and a 1 in front, so I can't do anything with the numbers, the coefficients. So this one has 3 x's in it, and this one has 2, so the most you can pull out is an x squared. And it leaves behind the 2x plus 1. Then with the -8 and -4, sometimes we forget the negative. So some people might pull out just the 4, but you're going to be left with -2 and -1. So we want to pull the -4 out. -8 divided by -4 is +2, and the x is still there. -4 divided by -4 is +1, and this is still less than 0. You could make that equal to 0 if you want, and you switch it up. But the point is, now I have 2 terms. Each term is split into 2 factors. So I'm underlining the common factor. So now we pull that out front as 2x plus 1. But that leaves behind the x squared and the -4. And then how do we factor x squared minus 4? So we have 2x plus 1, x minus 2, x plus 2. And so there is the final factoring after you do your factor by grouping. Set each one of those equal to 0. What happens when you set the first one equal to 0? You have to subtract the 1 to the other side, but don't forget about the coefficient of 2 here. Then you divide by 2. So you end up with a -1/2, a 2, and a -2, just to follow the order that they're in. So if we draw the number line, you would put -2 here, -1/2 here, and +2 there. What are we going to use on the number line? Open or closed dots? They're open because it's a strictly less than. So open, open, and open. So what you see now, how many different intervals do we have? We have one over here, one in between those 2, there, and there. So there are actually 4 different intervals that we have to write down. What are we looking for? Because it says less than 0, numbers that are less than 0 are negative. So you want to write that in. We're looking for negative intervals. So we have, is it 2x cubed? 2x cubed
X squared
plus x squared minus 8x minus 4, right? Okay. When you have the calculator in your hand, there's the picture of the graph, right? Notice, where is it touching the x-axis? -2, -1/2, and the +2. That's negative 2. This one is negative 1/2. And this one is positive 2. Okay. We're looking for where it's below the x-axis. So from negative infinity up until negative 2, where is it? Above or below the line? It's below. So that's part of my answer. Negative infinity all the way up to negative 2. What's happening in between the negative 2 and the negative 1/2? It's above. So we don't want that one. What's happening in between the negative 1/2 and the 2? It's definitely below. So we can add that to our list or our intervals, negative 1/2 to 2. And after 2, what's it doing? Going above. There's your answer. Now to be able to do that, it requires you to know what the graph is doing. It's cubic, it's doing this, you know. So some of you know that, some of you don't. U-shaped graphs, up or down. If you don't know how to do that, that's what this table is for. And so what we're going to do, we fill in the different intervals. The number 1 interval is negative infinity up to negative 2. Negative 2 up to negative 1/2. Negative 1/2 up to positive 2. And positive 2 to positive infinity. All of them get parentheses because it's a strictly less than problem. Give me a number between negative infinity and negative 2 that you can work well in your head. Negative 10. Now, with negative 10, you can always take this value, plug it into the original, or you can plug it into the factored form. If you plug it into the original, you know, 10 cubed gets a little large, so we're going to skip that. So we're going back here to the original. So in the first factor, you have 2x plus 1. What happens when you plug negative 10 in there? 2 times negative 10 is negative 20 plus 1 is negative 19, right? So I can do that math very quickly in my head. Do I really care what the number is? We're all about the sign. So the first factor gives me a negative. What's negative 10 minus 12? Negative. What's negative 10 plus 2? It's negative 8, but I just write down the negative. What happens when you multiply 3 negative numbers together? The answer is negative. And that's why in the graph that we looked at earlier, it was below the line. Something between negative 2 and negative 1/2 that would be nice to work with. There's only one whole number there. Sometimes you don't get any whole numbers and you have to... What? Okay. What's negative 2 plus 1? Negative. What's negative 1 minus 2? Also negative. What's negative 1 plus 2 on the last factor? Positive. So what happens when you take a negative times a negative times a positive? Something between negative 1/2 and 2 that's really nice to work with? 0. And 0 is really nice because when you take 0, you can go to the factored form, but if you go back to the original, 0, 0, 0. All you're left with is that negative 4, which is negative. And then maybe you do 10 here. And that's 20 plus 1, which is positive. 10 minus 2 is positive 8. And 10 plus 2 is positive 12. Multiply 3 positive numbers together, you get positive. So what's your answer? Here, right? And here. That's what the table is for. It'll tell you exactly how many intervals you should have. If you only fill in 3 of them, what happened is you missed one of your critical points for the cubic, right? So we're being kind of generous and giving you the table. But if you can go ahead and show me a picture and tell me where it's above or below the line and get the answer that way, I'm good with that.
Will it be either or on the